You are about to go on a tour of the farm structures of the historic Horseshoe Bay Farms, what Door County residents in the 1920s and 1930s called the famous Horseshoe Bay Farms at Egg Harbor. The farm buildings and farmhouses across the street were placed on the National and State of Wisconsin Historic Registers in May of 2012. The farm was recognized for its historical significance as a major farm operation. It was a major breeding farm for Holstein purebred stock. The farm pioneered breeding techniques, farm efficiency approaches, and production tracking statistics that greatly advanced the dairy industry in Wisconsin. The farm also had over 450 acres of apple, cherry, and plum orchards. It was the largest seasonal employer in Door County for several decades. Horseshoe Bay Farms was also recognized for its architectural significance as the largest intact farm complex in Wisconsin that contained both historic agricultural outbuildings and 5 houses designed to house the farm personnel. The farm's success reflects the people, both the owners and workers, who loved the property and the business and built a life on the farm, raising their families. First, the Murphy family, and what a remarkable family it was. It all began with Simon Murphy. Simon was a lumber baron with great timber holdings and lumber operations in Maine, Wisconsin, Michigan, and California. He knew every detail of the business, and until he died, there were few men in America who knew more about lumber. He sent 2 of his sons, Frank, sitting to the right of Simon Sr., and Simon Jr., to Wisconsin to log the Door County Peninsula and establish a sawmill in Green Bay. Frank Murphy is really the godfather of Horseshoe Bay Farms. More on that later. The Coles family. Frank Murphy had one daughter, Emily, who married Dr. Robert Coles, a pediatrician in Green Bay. They ran the farm for over 30 years and spent the summer in Door County. Their sons Robert, on the far right, and Frank, next to Robert, each got part of the farm when Robert Sr. and Emily passed. Frank got the property on the bluff, now Horseshoe Bay Farms Development and Horseshoe Bay Golf Club, the barns and the farmhouses. Robert got all pasture land north of the barns and 1,800 shore feet on Green Bay. United Fruit Growers Company, tourist industry pioneers. From a business standpoint, the first venture on the property was a development entity called United Fruit Growers Company. The business was formed to develop a piece of property along the shorefront north of Murphy Park. Frank Murphy became one of the principals in the venture. Land acquisition started around 1914 by the United Fruit Growers Company. Much of the property was logged for the Murphy lumber operation in Green Bay. The initial parcel was 115 acres on the shore and on the bluff. The idea was to build a country club and sell lots along the shoreline. The club would provide such sports as fishing, swimming, and boating. The club also had tennis courts and a baseball field. A golf course was laid out by Tom Bendelow, the most prolific golf course designer of all time, with over 800 courses in the U.S. He was called the Johnny Appleseed of American golf. The lots were platted along Green Bay. 100 acres of orchards were planted in near-ideal soil on the bluff. The United Fruit Growers Company continued to acquire land. By 1917, the United Fruit Growers Company had planted 200 acres of cherry trees and had begun construction of the first barn to house a herd of purebred Holstein cattle, an indication that things were not going well with the development and the golf club. Just why United Fruit Growers Company decided to grow cherries, raise cattle, as well as continue to focus on tourism development is unclear. Possibly the idea was to buy land while it was cheap, put it to productive use as a cash-generating farm until the other land could be sold as summer homes. Although hopes were high, the tourism vacation business did not attract enough support to succeed. The club closed in 1919. In 1918, the United Fruit Growers sold their property, over 700 acres, to Frank E. Murphy and his nephew, Elbridge Murphy. The new entity that was created was known as Murphy Farms and was jointly owned by Frank and Elbridge Murphy, Frank's cousin. The farm was divided into 2 separate entities, Murphy Farms I, which occupied all the land located at the foot of the bluffs and down to Green Bay, and Murphy Farms II, which occupied the larger portion of land that was located at the top of the bluffs. The Murphys continued to increase the acreage of the farm by another 460 acres, for a total close to 1,200 acres. Some of this acreage was sold off in later years. Farm 1, below the bluff, was a complete standalone community. 8 barns and another 7 support structures. This slide shows the view of the farm from the bluffs looking west towards Green Bay. Along with land purchase and farm building construction, the farm was engaged in large-scale purchases of purebred cattle. The Murphys intended to build one of the largest and best breeding farms in the state. In 1919, they made a $60,000 cattle purchase, including a $25,000 sire. In 1920, the purchase of an additional 28 thoroughbred Holsteins were on the way. By March 1920, the herd numbered more than 100, and by 1921, the breeding programs were starting to produce dividends as the cattle they raised brought higher prices at auction. The expansion of the farm's cherry orchards was also going on as well. By 1924, the cattle herd was large enough to justify its own veterinary surgeon. The local newspapers wrote constantly about the farm. It was the pride of Door County and positioned Door County in the front ranks of the dairying community. This emphasis on raising only the best purebred Holstein stock reflected the emerging lesson that the future of livestock raising lay in specialization. Purchasing and breeding purebred animals was the key to success. In addition, the comprehensive Murphy farm complexes were like factories, laid out with precision, with consideration for labor savings, and fully self-sufficient. In 1925, tragedy struck the farm. One of the prize bulls contracted Bang's disease and died 1 year after being purchased. Many of the animals were infected. In late 1925, the stock breeding farm announced it was being discontinued, and most of the healthy herd was sold at auction. The farm at this point was valued at $750,000. In December of 1925, Elbridge Murphy conveyed his share of the farm to Frank E. Murphy, and it became known as Horseshoe Bay Farms. The emphasis then shifted to fruit operations. In the decades that followed, dairy operations continued but eventually diminished in size and ultimately ended in the 1960s. Several buildings were refitted for the raising, harvesting, and storing of fruit produce. The acreage on the farms devoted to fruit raising was expanded, and Horseshoe Bay Farms eventually became the largest fruit producer in the county and the largest seasonal employer. They grew and sold cherries until 1963, and they grew apples until the early 1990s. In 1995, the Frank Murphy Coles family, descendants of Frank Murphy, began the realization of Frank Murphy's dream under the United Fruit Growers Company venture. Home sites with beautiful water views and bluff vistas were made available to those who wanted a special place in Door County. In 1998, the second phase of the dream started to become a reality in the construction of a first-rate golf course that opened in 2000. This concludes the overview presentation. Please follow the tour guide to begin the tour.